if we don't vote people out, even if you're saying that what has changed, nothing has changed, I think it's still better than to entrench the same system over a long period of time.
See, I'd say that people treat their workers, or they hold their workers to higher standards than they hold their government.
Yes.
Hi, welcome to the Shaft Podcast, and today is a very special one. We've hijacked the place today, guys. Charlie, welcome.
Thank you.
Charlie, Telfa has been on the podcast before.
I have.
I have
He's
been
the
on it
newbie.
before, but yeah.
It's my first time.
From one boy.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, Charlie, Eric, how does it feel like making your podcast debut?
Well, it feels good. I mean, joining the likes of you. I've been watching you guys from afar,
We are big men.
good. I'm
men.
joining the table of big men.
Right.
Yeah, but I think it's very interesting. I mean, we're having this conversation about how now podcasts are really the thing.
Yeah.
I remember there was a time that I was having a conversation with a very elderly person about, I think this was during the Clubhouse, Twitter Spaces
Right.
thing
The
coming up,
COVID.
era, yeah. And I thought that it looked like, even at the time, it seemed very clear to me that we're going to have a very serious challenge to traditional media. I am a retired journalist. As
So
guys
you
know.
say.
Yeah, so you say.
But I think it's really interesting to the extent that we have an election coming up, and already in terms of the people who are leading the conversation, maybe not leading, but very active in the conversation and the space. I've seen that podcasts have really played a key role. I don't know if you get the same sense generally.
No, I mean, a few years ago, it would not have even been conceivable that presidential candidates would go on podcasts.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you saw in the American election, one of the big things, the big fallouts was Kamala not going on the Joe Rogan podcast and stuff like that. And so generally, I mean, growing up, all we knew was traditional media. And the limits in terms of the type of people that went on to traditional media, the type of opinions that could be expressed on traditional media and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so to see that there's been this opening up of the space where everyday random people are sharing their ideas, we have all sorts of perspectives that we could not have previously had.
On anything.
On anything, really, just broadly. I think it's exciting. It's an exciting time for information. And really, because of the nature of how diverse these podcasts are, people can go anywhere in respect of what they are looking for. So that's exciting, really, for me.
Yeah, totally. Because to be very honest, more conversations are very important. So I always say, if we are going to prioritize conversations, then we need to make sure that everybody's voice is part of that conversation. And that's what podcast does.
Yeah.
It makes it easier. The tech, and also I think we have to give credit to the advancement of technology.
Yeah.
That rapid growth has made sure that we have all the tools that we can sit in our rooms and just create content and have discussions on important issues that someone miles away can have access to. It's very, very important.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. And even for me, if I look at it within the context also of, I mean, it really still coming from the journalism home, because that's how we sort of conceive these conversations. And coming from there, I think it's now placing very different burdens on the so-called mainstream journalists, the traditional media, and all of that. So last time I was listening to a radio conversation, I think was one of the former journalists of the year, Bernard Avle, who was making the point that now the kinds of expectations of the so-called traditional media now is to offer more in terms of nuance and context.
Right.
Because in terms of the speed of conversation and information, it's hard to really beat the so-called new media to it. And I think it's I don't know how much the media is taking up that challenge and doing it very well in terms of offering context, because it seems to me that a lot of people are actually also very disappointed in the mainstream media in a way that it goes about things generally. I don't know.
I mean, I personally, I don't remember the last time I watched, news on TV or even listened to a radio program, because I mean, I get the news on demand. Yeah. So by the time it's on TV or on radio, I must have probably read it on social media or something of the sort. And so I would only listen to a TV program or a radio program if I felt that it was going to color the conversation in a certain way that I cannot have possibly had anywhere else. So I think, like you said, I don't know if traditional media is able to rise to the challenge and to the task to ensure that they are offering something more exciting than, because really just to come and say what is happening in the news will not, I mean, that's not something difficult for anybody to do these days. Once you have a camera, once you have a microphone, once you have access to the internet, you can do all of these things, and people are even getting news at faster rates than traditional media would typically do. So I think that evolution is key for traditional media. And so you see, for instance, the BBC has evolved into spaces where they have active podcasts.
Yes.
So if you listen to BBC, they have...
They really collapsed a lot of their World Service programs.
Yes.
Even Focus on Africa on the World Service has now been turned into a podcast.
Yeah, so you see that there's that evolution going there, because really people just want to feel like it's not just the punchy, proper style of, delivering the news. When they listen to a podcast, they listen to podcasts because they just want to hear a conversation, and they just want to be able to relate to that conversation. So I'm sure as time goes on, of course, they either evolve or they die, and so we'll have to find mechanisms to ensure that.
I would just say, like, for instance, I think the nuance issue is important. Unfortunately, I think I get more nuance when I listen to podcasts than I do when I go on traditional media. So if that's their role that they have to play now, they're already failing at it.
Right.
So it's very important that they join the conversation. Because what they have already amassed huge following.
Credibility.
And
so they can very just individually
be driven. And I think it's also really has coincided with, or perhaps it's a product of this like influencer culture in the way that it is. Because truly, of course, I'm sure even within the traditional media context, there were also still some influencers. There were more famous names than others.
Exactly.
But now, I think maybe the word that earlier Telfa was also using about the democratization, there's a bit more decentralization or devolution of whatever power there may be. Of course, if you are still in some spaces, you can shoot up more than others. But I think it's really, really interesting. But I want us to like very quickly drift into this, because we're still in this period where we're getting ready for elections. There's a lot of conversation and all of that. Personally, when I look at what is at stake, the way that I think of our problem generally, this election, or generally elections as we have been having it for some time now, doesn't really give me any cause to be optimistic. Even though, as people say, the decisions that we'll make on the 7th of December mean something, right? But I don't know where any of you, I don't know, I just don't feel very strongly about things.
Yeah, I think, because, for instance, I always think that because our politics is not ideologically driven, it's always difficult to really see the grand ideas that compete for us to really get excited about, especially me, if I speak for myself. So this election, for instance, I'm with you. There's nothing exciting in it for me. All I can see is that I know some people want to continue in government, and some people want change. Like that's the nature of the excitement.
Even the change. What does it mean?
It's like change the government. That's what I see. I don't see any real like excitement about the ideas generally. Because even the followers of the political parties, I don't think they've bought into the ideas themselves. That they have internalized it, and they can speak to it in a way that someone like me, I can really follow.
I mean, I made this point yesterday on Twitter.
As you know, yes, let's talk about that.
I mean, I feel like maybe because of the timing, it has been lost in context, and so a lot of interesting reactions have come my way. But really, the central point is,
what was your tweet again?
It was just generally, it was generally about the fact that we have become a nation that votes to punish. And not necessarily based on a message for transformation for the growth of this country. And you see, it just dovetails into the points that both of you were making about the feeling you have about this election. Because well and truly, you do not believe the ideas that ought to be central, front and center in this election are being discussed. We don't see, maybe, so the feeling people have is from either of the political parties, we don't see a clear plan to take us out of some of the issues that we have. And that, for me, is what has become problematic, because we have entered this loop or this cycle where every 4 years, it is not necessarily about the ideas that can change this country, but it's more about getting one out, replacing them with another. And the danger with that is when a new government comes, they only have to do the bare minimum, because the expectation is that, oh, don't be as wicked as the previous government. Once you do that, that's fine. But I think that's not sustainable because, and I mean, it goes to the wider problem of our politics without ideas.
You Eric finish, and I'll read Topher's. I really want to stay on that a bit, but
but you see, I think I feel you, I see where you're coming from, but it's also the design of our democratization process.
I agree.
Which means that at every stage in our, our governance system, we have relegated accountability completely
to the election.
Exactly. So that's the only tool that people have.
No, I see that.
So if they don't do it now,
when? But you see,
when do they get that accountability?
We elect governments and go to sleep. We think that the democratic process ends on the day the new president is elected. I don't believe that. I believe that, especially because we have a weak parliament. But if we had an effective parliament where the parliament was serving as a constant check on the executive, we had people who were parliament, like across the world, parliaments are organizing hearings, proceedings, just to inquire into matters of public concern.
They will tell you that they do it here also. I think, you see, what I see is there's obviously the ideals as we know it.
Yes.
And if everybody were doing what they must do,
then everything is okay.
But what we seem to have created over time here, I even get a sense that we don't have a very good appreciation of what it is. So typically you would find some people in some circles, so the civil society spaces, the Bright Siemens, the HKC Prempers at CDD, and others. And maybe to understand even activists like Oliver Barker, Felicity Nelson, Ernesto Yeboah, and many others, right? As they continue to say, there's this thing about state enchantment. There's even the way that we have the democracy is structured, even for those who want to do something beyond just voting and relaxing on accountability. There are very clear structural measures to make sure that you are not able to achieve that.
I see that point. And also, it also stems from the way in which we view governance in this country. It's because we think that people who are elected, there's a way in which we have to speak to them. And we think that everybody ought to be partisan one way or the other. So sometimes we view the cynicism of activists with a little, we're like, so this thing has become everybody should wear their jersey. That type of thing. So we don't even give credit to people that stand up in terms of, trying to hold people to account. So I see that difficulty and I see that challenge. So I guess maybe it also has to dovetail into a wider conversation as to whether we appreciate the roles that activists, civil society, all these other people play in helping, ensure that we have a governance that is truly responsive to our needs.
Yeah, that being said, if you could read it.
Yes. Maybe they want to cook me here too.
Because, I mean, let me read it first and then Eric, you can, because I have my own reservations also about this. So, Topher's tweet was about, to quote him directly, we can't keep voting to punish, in quotes, a political party. We must vote on account of a message to truly transform the fortunes of this country. That, for me, is what is crucial, end quotes. And the reactions were...
beautiful.
Yes, that's why I wanted to read again, because of the last part of the message, which obviously talks about we must vote on account of the message that you are receiving. But that's the thing. I don't think we lack messages. Like, for the different type of times we've had elections, we've not lacked messages. We've had messages. We've had presidents that have sworn that they were incorruptible and that,
could not become rich in their government.
So if you were swayed by that and you went on and you voted for such a government and the government, you don't see that within that governance. I mean, what can you do? You go for the next idea, right? And especially with this election, I think this election too is unique in the sense that we have a candidate who has been president before.
Right.
So there's already something that they've done that we can look up to. And we have Exactly, vice president in it, who are basically the two front runners for the election.
Yeah.
So we have something to judge them
I will
on.
argue that Afafanto is
Yeah, fair enough. Afafanto, like all that.
Cheddar, yes.
Yeah.
Kofi Kranti.
We have something to judge them on.
Yeah.
So they are not new to us with their new ideas.
Yes.
We've heard the ideas before. So what message is again?
And again,
let me just put the tweet in context. When I say message, it's not really about rhetoric, really, Eric, and it's not the thing about us not. So I'll give you, like, this is the best. When I was having when this tweet blew up, I was having a conversation with somebody, and I told them that imagine you're a football coach, and your team was losing, and you wanted to take a weak player out. On what basis would you substitute the player? You're not just taking him to put him on the bench. You're bringing on a player who you think is better.
Can affect the game.
And can effectively change the game.
Yeah.
And how do you determine that the player can effectively change the game? Based on what you've seen in training.
Yes.
Based on what the player has offered you. So, for instance, you see Chelsea now. One of the best teams in England right now.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So you see that. So, for instance, in the game against Southampton, right?
Yes.
Maresca takes off Madueke and brings on Sancho.
Yeah.
Karim hates that player.
I mean,
he's turning out good under this coach.
And he makes the point about how Madueke trains, and he thinks Madueke can do better.
Yeah.
So if in football you only substitute a player to come on the base, not just because one player is waste, but because the player you think is coming on can make a change. Yeah. I don't think that when we are electing political leaders, so the thing is, I'm not saying that shouldn't be a consideration.
Yeah.
I'm saying that cannot be our only consideration. I'm saying that when we elect leaders, we must also be sure that even though we've punished one political party, the other political party has a clear plan to take us out of the mess that we have.
I think there is a bit of, I think it gets a bit disingenuous if you look at it that way. Because, and again, and I think, of course, this is really about you, so I was just going to say, let's not make it about you, but I think it is because you originally put out that tweet. But I think the point also is that people react to all of these in context, right? So when I assess the tweet, and from the person that it's coming from...
You think I'm saying it for
yes.
the vice president?
And the time you are saying it.
Yes, because I think...
You didn't say
so I'm coming. If I said this 3 years ago...
I think it would be a different consideration.
I think it could be. Yeah, I think it could be. So...
No, but you see the point is the context of this election. Yes. The reason I put out that tweet was because I saw about 6-7 tweets where the whole thing was, we have to vote this government to punish them.
Yeah.
We have to vote out this government to punish them, punish them. And so my reaction was, I understand it, and people have every right to vote based on whatever consideration that they think is necessary. I believe that. My fear really was, 8 years ago, when people went to the polls, people thought they were voting to punish the NDC, right? And many people have regrets about that decision, which is fair. But my point was, if we looked only to punishment as a means of effecting democratic change, we really will not make any real progress.
So the context for me that I think it's missing in this case, and for me also, when I sit back, generally like following these debates, and for people, especially in civil society space, people that I really rate, like there's a way that I expect them to come to it. Because I think here, one challenge for people also is, as we were talking about earlier, it's what the democracy has become. So the idea of punishing, of voting someone out, even though sometimes you may notice that they have taken whatever it is they have taken, it just shows a certain level of helplessness that people have.
I agree.
That in terms of demanding accountability, in terms of getting people to do what they must, it's always very hard. So
have our political leaders learned anything from that?
But maybe not. But
I was telling you that I read something about from Kofi Boateng, a good friend of ours, on Facebook, that like when you're walking on coal, you know, you don't just put all the weight on one leg. No, you try to balance it with both feet, and I think that was very important.
You can move at least.
Because then, whilst you're going through that hardship, you need to still be balancing things. You don't want to entrench, and I feel if we do not, because of course the problems with our democracy, we can't have any ways to hold our people accountable. If we don't vote people out, even if you're saying that what has changed, nothing has changed, I think it's still better than to entrench the same system over a long period of time. I think then there will be no comeback. Even the election might not be a better way to even punish anymore because it will be completely gone.
No, I don't even believe in, say for instance, I'm saying two things can happen. You can walk and chew gum. I'm saying that if people want to vote out this government on account of punishing them, that's all well and good.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that should not be our only consideration. That was really my intent with that tweet. That going beyond willingness to punish this party, we must also look to what the alternative is presenting, such that when the alternative comes into government, our focus will not only be on the fact that we've forgotten the sense of.
I hear you. So the question is that if the alternative now comes to power,
yes,
what are we going to hold them to?
By what metric do we hold them to account? Do we simply say we've just punished them?
So do we say we are successful because we have punished them so they have the
4 years to do whatever they want?
Like, what are we going to hold them to?
Exactly my point.
I think that it's also a function of, and this incremental nature of the problem. It crystallizes it in a way that ultimately makes our lives extremely difficult, because I think a good part of that, and this is very anecdotal, but I believe strongly in that, is because this government fumbled the bag very, very horribly post-2016 in a way that I think it has really dissipated public confidence, however little it was at the time. Because it seemed to me that 2016, when we're doing the shift, the way that it happened, the misery that we were in with Dumso and many other things.
We voted for ideas.
Yes.
We didn't vote for punishment like
some
that.
People...
Actually, but you would
maybe
even
to understand there was an element of that in there. For me, it is just the connection between that period and now, and the way that we are hearing people. Because it seems that for the NDC and Mahama, who seemed completely out of place and so poor, leading up to the 2016 election, such that now people are able to bring up Mahama again, and some of the things that happened there, to do a comparative analysis with what is happening now to see whether or not were things that bad. People are now beginning to even question themselves whether, and for me, that's a complete failure.
It looked at that time was so bad.
Yes. But now... So I see the revisionism, right? And I have said that perhaps the MPP should do some inward looking and see that the fact that President Mahama is even a likely winner of this election is an indictment on their governance over the last few years.
I like that. Yeah. So the question I will have for you is then, where are they best to do this in looking? Yeah. Is it when they are in governance validated to continue? So why would they take that message as?
I'm coming, Eric. Just let me finish this point. I see what you're trying to do, but let me just finish this point. Because, I would be the last to say that it hasn't been difficult, especially the last 4 years. Across the country, people have had severe challenges. The domestic debt exchange program was painful.
Yes.
People have lost investments. People have gone through lows that maybe in our lifetime some people have even never experienced. And for me, I said this about 2 years ago, that when I consider social media, it's the best test for just how much has changed over the last 8 years. Because 8 years ago, it was almost unheard of for anybody to be confidently NDC on social media. People would come after you in the way that now people are coming after those who are NPP. And it was just because of the challenges people had then. Yeah. So for me, it's particularly worrying that for young people that have now come to political exposure for the first time, their first brush with politics is coming at a time where there's an all-time low or all-time in terms of trust, in terms
public
of
trust,
public trust,
system,
in terms of what government... Basically, many people have even decided not to participate in this election because they've asked themselves the question of what will change, what will do differently. And that makes me very sad, and that disappoints me. And I hear you when you say that perhaps the best way forward would be for them to do the inward looking outside. Yeah. And then, if they are elected, would that also mean a validation of all the horrible things that the people have perceived them to have done and stuff?
Because to be very honest with you, in the 2020 elections, they lost, the margin was closed. Yeah. I don't think it changed much. So that's what I'm wondering. Is it that, did they check and see that we lost maybe 4%? So can we say that? I think people will even say that the last 4 years have been worse than the first one.
Yeah, and you see, it's also a governance thing. So, the way that I look at it, and this is something that I always have with Boache, because with all of the things that happen, I really think about them through a very cultural lens. Right. Because in terms of, all the debates about the economy and who's doing very well with the CD and all of those things, I think that owing to the very structural nature of the problem, if we don't deal with those kinds of things, I think each and every person will come around, borrow and do a couple of things. That doesn't change much for me. For me, it's about the norms, right? So if we want to cultivate a proper democratic space and system to let people flourish and all of that, we need to maintain some principles. It seems to me that, yes, we have been on this journey for a very long time where the political elites almost entirely bastardize the system in a way that allows them to maneuver. I think it has been completely worse within the past 8 years, also on the account of where we are coming from. So there was a lot of groundswell among young people. There was a lot of energy. But we just seem to have picked that and completely misused it in a way that today people have just lost energy, right? So people will go out there and vote and all. But even in terms of the threshold or the heights of accountability, how far really, based on the account of what we have seen, can anybody go with the next person who wins this election?
I have said that I don't care who wins the next election, but whoever wins the next election is a very steep hill to climb in terms of building back trust in public institutions. I agree with you that some actions of this government have, in a certain way, eroded the confidence people have in public institutions. I have been particularly critical on the way they handle protests. It's as though at every time when people wanted to protest, they saw it as an attempt to undermine the government. And
people.
I mean, we were making this point earlier that the police found the resources to provide security for events they themselves said were potentially risky for the security of the state. They found the resources.
For the
See the number of people
goals
that showed up at the rallies yesterday, and compare that to the number of people that even wanted to show up at the protest. And that tells you that in terms of the way in which so many things, and it's in so many,
but that's a norm, though.
I get the point that some things have been done, especially over the last 4 years, that we cannot absolutely normalize, and we cannot say this is right or this is okay. Because when we do that, it's essentially there's even very little limitation in terms of how we hold government to account.
Yeah, because those things have just rippling effect on many, many things.
Yes.
Right? So for instance, even in terms of this accountability thing that we talk about, the reality is that you must demand accountability because someone is not doing it, someone whose job it is.
Has not given
it. So you must. It's something that you must always activate. But if you must activate, then it also means that, especially by the very nature of accountability and transparency, it is seeking to either stop or uncover something that oftentimes is wrong. That means that you would expect some sort of a pushback.
Exactly. Some sort of resistance.
Yeah. So if
it wasn't there, they would have brought it in
Good.
the way.
So if you consider all of that, then the question would be the way that if you are, say, the government, the way you conduct yourself must affect all of these things in a progressive way. So if we have this behavior that the Ghana police goes about, and oftentimes we create this false dichotomy between the state or the government and the police and create this impression that they are independent, blah, blah, blah. That's all a lie, right? So even for me, in terms of the way we talk about it, we should not do it, and again, it must be viewed within context. You see, if we have an Akufo-Addo, right, who is a product of demonstration, protests, his political career, his fortunes are enriched greatly by the fact that he can lay claim to being with a common person and defying odds, going to court, changing some of these provisions and all of that. If you lead, and all of a sudden there's such a blind eye taken to that. And for me, that's why I really want this government to lose. Because I think that just on the account of the kinds of things that we have seen, and again, sometimes it's also not all the time really, it's not really about the people at the center alone.
Yes.
When I'm problematizing this government, I'm problematizing across many lengths. So I'm looking at Galamsey, I'm looking at Echemanun to me, I'm looking at some Bronga Hafo, chairman of the party, all of them, because we have elite capture in the way that the politics works. At any point, not that the NDC or whoever would win would also have problematic individuals, but I mean, that's the thing. It just can't be rewarded. Because there was really the opportunity to do things very differently, but we haven't seen that. It's just very heartbreaking for me.
Yeah, I can feel it.
No, I hear you on that. I understand those sentiments, and I mean, we've all lived in this country, and so to be disingenuous for everybody or for anybody to really say that these things did not happen or these things really did not exist. But then the question also then becomes, we as a people, we also have to, if you like, take a real look at the way in which we look at political actors.
Yeah.
And I agree with you when you say that.
But when we mention like we as a people.
No, I'm just coming. I agree with you when you mention that. Like the thing about government also is that some of the loudest voices we saw leading up to 2016 have all of a sudden
been quiet,
been as loud, and that has also been a cause for dismay in respect of a lot of people. I also don't believe in a type of politicking where your political party can do everything right, and you think that no matter what it is, you have to stand by them and defend them. I think that correction can come from within. I think that
actually,
in the nature of political systems, it is in the interest of individuals of the party to always make sure they're able to put the party on a course correct, right? And for me, that really is the most fundamental question I look to in this election. That when I look at the two of the leading candidates who would potentially win the election, it's as though really the sentiment for one side is just a case of, we need to kick these guys out, and a lot of bad things ought not to be normalized, which is also a legitimate expression of voter intention. It's a very legitimate one. But I worry really about what that means for us as a people and what that means going forward, because then really, by what metric and by what account are we also holding the next government to? By what standards are we looking to them to do? Are we saying if they don't do as bad as these guys
punish them as well?
I guess.
We continue going down the drain.
No, but Eric, I think you should bring back the point that you were raising with Telfa before we continue. About
but the
collectivization
I think that's where the problem is.
Yeah.
And I think I've had this conversation with you before, and then you mentioned about like the statehood.
Yeah.
Like, do we as a people, in order to really say that, okay, we don't want this?
Yeah. I don't think we do. And for me, those are the kinds of directions that I really require from leadership when I think about these things. Because at our own individual levels, there are a lot of things that will happen. But I cannot accept the collectivization.
No, that's not even a collectivization problem, as a blaming problem. As I see it as, look, political parties are made up of individuals.
Yeah.
Yes.
Individuals make up the political parties. So when I say we as people, I even mean it across the spectrum.
We get that.
I'm saying that the individuals in these parties must be looking at things differently.
Yeah, so I think what is missing there is it's what it is that these individual entities that come together, because I get a sense of you're talking about Ghana as a collective in this case. Yeah. The reason that is difficult, and for me, the reason why I think when you are doing the analysis, you must account for the reality that we have in our world.
Yes.
I don't think a lot of people, and this is not even to be condescending or anything, I think genuinely, I don't think a lot of people have that kind of
sophistication.
Not even sophistication, maybe just a basic understanding because of the place that people find themselves.
Yeah, no, because Karim, you have to admit that most of the time our politics is economics. So people align themselves because of the high levels. I'm coming. Because of the high levels of poverty.
Yeah.
You'd find that oftentimes people just do politics as a means to an end.
Yeah.
So people go into politics because they think that is what will change their lives, really, economically. It will lift them out of poverty. And because we have that type of thinking, when people go into politics, they don't go into it with good intentions. So they go into these types of politics with self-serving intentions. And I think that's where the wider problem is.
Yeah, because that's what the politics is.
No, I agree. And so my point is, so long as we have that type of political system, it doesn't matter who is elected. We'll still come back 4 years from now and still have this type of conversation.
So then that means this is a cycle. Because
so it's that type of cycle that I'm frustrated by.
Yeah, for me, the way, and that's what the way you change
that cycle.
So
is the elected people.
Yes, it's first.
The people can't change that.
It's first
to not work.
To see that really, because the vast majority of the people, like if you look at them individually before even that comes together as a collective, they operate within this space where, as you are even describing, obviously merit is not the most important thing. Political affiliation, association, this winner takes all mentality, and among many other things. So So I just feel like even the people, in many ways, are victims of the
absolutely
of that reality. So in resolving that, and that's what, for me, I am more obsessed with the political leadership class.
Okay.
Right?
So if I
Yeah.
get to the two of you correctly,
Yes.
you think that in resolving that, we need to send a strong rebuke first. And
I
then
think we must always hold them. Because
No, I agree. No,
that's
we
where
need-
the change comes from.
I don't disagree that
No.
the political class is ultimately responsible for everything. But I'm saying that, for instance, there are a new group of people that are going to grow into either of the parties after this election.
Yeah.
So say, for instance, if the government loses, there will likely be a purge because there will be a sense that we need to get rid of these people. And my point is, for the newer people that are coming to take up spaces, are they coming with the right type of mentality?
No, obviously not.
And you see, that is also a problem. You see, and I agree with you when you say that we are all victims of the system, because the system is set up such that no matter how well you're, and we were discussing this earlier, that even if we elected somebody who had the best intentions, in a year or two they would have shot him. So we need to look really at our entire political system and ask ourselves the question of if our democracy is achieving the gains for which we intended it to be.
So Tafa, that's why, like Karim was saying, that this government, when they came to power, when there was a lot of belief in the system that they could change things, they had that opportunity. And that's why that punishment must come to them. Because, to be very honest with you, because that time is where we have the people, and then we can change their attitude through the policies and whatever we do.
I see that. No, I agree.
Because,
for
instance,
that.
now this government, aside not doing that, has eroded every other opportunity that citizens can use to hold them accountable.
No, I agree that.
By not just holding them accountable, but now holding the entire system. That means that the next government too,
and then it creates a new precedent that makes
very dangerous precedents.
The comparative always the lowest hanging fruit.
Eric and Karim, I agree.
And I don't even mind. I think the punishment, for me, I think people who don't do well, and maybe they need to be punished. But the question that we have to ask ourselves is that, where can we get the punishment? Because I wish maybe Akufo-Addo indicted some of the corrupt people, and then they were punished for it, so that we don't need the election to punish them.
No, I agree that perhaps this government had the greatest opportunity to
I think they did.
change the course of our politics. And
they really did.
There was so much more that could have been done in respect of engendering goodwill. And maybe because, again, when you elect somebody with over 1 million votes, and with the type of margins that we had never before seen, with the type of majority they had in parliament, really the expectation was we're putting Ghana on a certain path.
I don't think they got the message. I think they also thought that we just didn't want Mahama.
And you see, that goes back to my problem. Because now, assuming this government loses and NDC is elected.
But the only problem is I don't think people have a lot of public confidence, any confidence in the NDC.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that a John Dramani Mahama presidency should not be on the basis of thinking, Ghanaians just wanted to punish the MPP. There should be so much more with the way in which people are elected after such a difficult time, understand and approach the politics. That, for my view, was where we went wrong, or where we go wrong in terms of looking at it in a one dimension. So I agree that sometimes political leaders have so much power in terms of the way people, because really, if you go into office, you perform creditably, now you're even inspiring a younger generation of people to go into politics. Because, you see how now there's Project Mbappe. People see Mbappe doing so many things, and they're like, okay, now I want my kid to be like that. So naturally, there's a bandwagon effect on when people do well in office and political office holders, conduct themselves creditably. But I'm saying that in terms of the way we view these things, I'm just hoping that political actors would see their roles when they're elected into office.
They won't.
But that's
it's a very difficult position. And it's not like you have to defend them or anything. So, but I think the reason I don't think that happens, and that's why for me these days I also try to, even the way that I think about the problem, because I don't think they will do it, because what we are seeing
they don't have an incentive.
There's no incentive to do that.
That's my problem. It worries me so much that their only incentive is let's kick them out when we come.
So then let me introduce this thing, because I think that's also something that I see. It's very adjacent to this in terms of how. So the fundamental thing for me is that we don't seem to picture or define the problem right, and so even in terms of doing something about it, even our general disposition towards activists, right? So let's talk about Oliver Barker, because he's become like he's always the most controversial actor in the or fix the country or any of them as they have become. Even in the face of all of this, I also worry, and here you can tell me if you think that's not fair, because I think the scrutiny, right, that we even present to people who are attempting to challenge and to do something very different. Let me do a very quick example with the protests as we have seen it.
Yeah.
It is very clear for anybody who is interested to know that the police always acts in a very, 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 very bad faith situation when it comes to protests. They are always disposed to preventing and then lying under and all of that. So they're just very insincere. And then again, sometimes the way protests are done, they must have a certain effect to drive home a particular point.
It must be uncomfortable.
Protests
are not designed to be comfortable.
Yes. Of course, people have their own right to their own protection. Their property must be safeguarded and all of that. But when you look at all of that, it is not surprising that protesters would, in asserting those kinds of rights to protest the way that they should, would sometimes violate, or they will go directly against the establishment or the police, among other things.
They don't even violate. They just challenge.
Yes. Take for instance the commissioning of the police van. Right. Yeah. So if you look at all of that, and sometimes even by their own commentary and their own ideas on things and all, the way that sometimes very known actors. So if you take Oliver, one of his biggest interlocutor, if you put it, would be Mr. Yaon Sako.
Yes.
And we are old people, so we talk about Facebook a lot. But, yeah. So I don't know what do you think about all of that? Because the kind of push that activists get.
Yeah.
Maybe it's also our own way of
I think we sometimes even scrutinize activists more than we do politicians.
And that's why I was busy asking you about who are the people. Because I think that's very important. No, because aside even the political actors, even people that seems to have a sense of they want better for the country, like your HK Prempers and the things Professor Azar, Yaon Sako and the rest. Basically, the elites that they are old, but they want to safeguard democracy and everything. For some reason, and I was telling Karim the other time, I always feel like it's a betrayal. Yeah. Because they want the system to be better.
Yes.
They write long essays.
Very eloquent.
Every time.
Yes.
Challenging.
They have opinions.
But when people take that and they act on it, either they avoid commenting on it or even, for instance,
I'll explain why. It's a cultural issue.
But beyond that, then they condemn the most maligned
extraneous
around that.
It's a cultural issue because, the Ghanaian culture is such that, you must express your opinion, but it's a word here. You have to be respectful in the way in which you do it. And I've been a long critic of the way in which we perceive those things because, like we were mentioning earlier, protest, before anybody takes any protest seriously, it has to be disruptive in some nature. I'm not saying commit crimes, but I'm saying that, you must be on your way to work and feel the inconvenience. That is how you draw the attention to those particular things.
Because, again, just before you continue, one other thing that I think often is missing is that people misunderstand what it is that you are doing the protest against. Yeah. So sometimes, it may be true on the face of it that you just hate the idea of protest, or that you would want people to be in a queue and behave themselves in a certain way. But ask yourself that if it is true that usually it's a political class that they are protesting against, if it is true that the political class, the way that they act and conduct themselves is such that they don't just take anybody seriously, and that they're just simply not doing their job. And sometimes, and oftentimes, they are very basic stuff. Yeah. Right? It's about some elevator not working at a hospital, or water bodies being destroyed completely. Yeah. So if all of that are true, then our threshold for discomfiture and
must be very high.
Must be extremely high.
Must be very high.
Not the way that we see.
Yeah. Look, Karim, let's look at it this way. So we're just talking about people like Oliver, right?
Yeah.
And my issue really is that, like every human being, Oliver may have excesses. Yeah. And typically, what you see is sometimes people try to, just focus on the excesses, taking away from the important message that he's trying to, send across.
And someone like Oliver, it's quite clear. I think one of the people, the activists that I've heard, if you listen to him, He has the language.
Yes.
He's very clear in defining the issue. But for some reason, all of that get lost.
Yeah, because
and
people
then we
like
just focus on he took the key from the police van.
Because people like to major in the minors, really. But then it goes back to the central issue. And Karim, you were just making this point about the fact that if we don't increase our tolerance for discomfiture and we want to just rely on elections every 4 years, we run the risk where governments can come and do as they please.
Yes.
We need people like that. We need to have that type of thinking, and I was in this podcast a while ago, and I was making the example of how there are people that are permanently stationed at the White House, always protesting. We don't even know what they are protesting for.
Yes.
But one way or the other, they are always protesting.
Yes.
And that's one of the most secure buildings in the world. Yet we think that people wanting to protest opposite the Jubilee House, that is so scandalous.
Yes.
And it just goes back to the primary issue is such that, and you'd see that when they interviewed some people who were using that stretch, and they were insulting the protesters on the day of the protest.
They would tell them to go to the forest, the Galamsey area.
But you see, we are all affected by the issues that these people protest about. And fortunately or unfortunately, because of the power of social media, when these things happen, that is when governments begin to take it seriously. Because you have to remember that it is only when the conversation started around the mining LI that it even came up. A lot of people didn't even know an LI such as that existed. And it is only when conversations or protest criticism such as these happen. So I guess really on our in terms of our public intellectuals, they
should do more.
There's so much more they can do.
So I want to stay on this because there's a part of their failing that is also sometimes very worrying for me. Because even the way that Yusuf has explained this, I think there's still something missing there, because it is true that there's a bigger culture that we are all co-opted into, and sometimes you have to behave in a certain way. If I've been through our boarding houses and all, you be treated in a certain manner. Good. But the people who are in these places, these positions of influence in our society, among others, by their orientation and sometimes the way they come to these conversations, there's a sense that they know what it is that this problem is. If you work at CDD, if you are at the top of CDD,
money.
I mean, your assessment of issues generally, even in terms of your access to information and all of that, always leads you to do a relatively better assessment than the average person.
Yeah.
So that is not really the problem. The problem is their own orientation and the way that they perceive that we can have this change. Yeah. So the kinds of people that Eric mentioned, like Professor Kwesi Prempeh, and I mean, talk about CDD broadly or even Imani broadly, is that they expect the change to be so incremental, but through still within the institutional framework and the systems and all. And then they have come other groups like Fix the Country with some of their conveners like Oliver, Felicity, many others who have seen with Occupy Jolobi, the way that they think about issues. Even before them, if you take the Economic Fighters League with Ernesto and his team, from a very economic, structural, materialistic point of view, when they depart from the conventional means, it seems, and I think that's where Eric is coming from, it seems that the best of us don't have it within us to appreciate that kind of forceful departure.
And I find that whole sense, I find that whole sense of naivety about our reality difficult to contemplate when it comes from them, because it always feels like we are in the system. We know these reforms are not going to work.
Yes.
I don't know. For some reason, I think they believe it would work. And that's why I just always struggle.
But you also have to recognize that, and this is something I've learned across that sometimes to some of these voices, and I'm not going to mention any name in particular, so I'm just issuing that disclaimer, but some of these voices are the ones who spearhead the reforms.
Yeah.
So they are beneficiaries.
I was mentioning to Karim that
they are the ones who draft the policy proposals.
Well, there's such a thing as policypreneurs,
yes,
right?
So they are the ones who eventually, if we don't go that way, that everybody...
That policy that came out, like their brainchild.
Yes.
Yeah, but what is a fair critique of these people? So, because for me...
I think it's just intergenerational. That's the first thing. And it's intergenerational because they lived in an era where they were able to usher in a new dispensation of like democracy, and it was a good thing compared to where they were coming from.
Yeah.
And in some way, we might say all that we want about the democracy. It still looks better than where they were. Yeah. So I don't think they have reached that tipping point yet. but for young people like us,
this is our first brush. We don't think this can be a reality.
I really struggle with that analysis because I think I've made this point.
Yes.
Because I really think they do.
No, but Karim, I think that for some of them who live through the military era,
the comfort. And this comfort is not even material comfort that comes with it.
The peace of mind.
Like the comfort that they experience now from the time that they were pushing hard, protesting for something better.
Yeah.
I think the way they will say that, oh, you've not seen worse.
Yeah.
That's why you are doing
you've
this.
not lived through a military.
But like, to be very honest, I feel that's where it comes to. And I thought it might not even be intentional, like they've actually thought about it in that way. But I feel it does play a huge part in the way that even them, their own ideas, they can just go against it just because they feel it's a little bit radical.
Yeah, I think I see that because I think there's obviously my only thing is that the way that I also give people too much credit, but I just think they deserve it somehow.
I think they do
because I really think they do have a proper understanding.
What about Facebook? I'm just reading about the things that they do.
We think we do.
No, absolutely.
I agree.
And sometimes the depth with which they show across different issues, like sometimes the nuance they provide.
And I think we need that.
I just struggle with why, even though I give them all that goodwill, I just struggle with why and I hear Eric's explanation, but I also just think that
this is a tipping point for young people.
Yes,
I don't think it is a tipping point for them.
No, not for them. But I think even if it were not for them, my view is that based on where they are, what they know, and the way they contribute to the discourse and all, they should understand where it is that the young people are, and sometimes actually lend them a hand. That's how they don't have to do anything.
The credibility that comes from them, if they are lending young people a hand, it will go so much.
That if anything,
but I think it's an imagination problem too.
Sako, overly criticizing Oliver.
Yes,
it already just destroy everyone who ever felt was maybe inspired by the activism of Oliver to want to go same because maybe there's a mention of violence and things in there.
I just want to make this point also that it's because also we tend to glorify personalities here. So sometimes we fail to realize that sometimes movements take on a character larger than the people that started. So really, the whole protest, really, what started as the Occupy Julobi, even from last year, it started as Fix the Country, Oliver's idea, but it took on a larger character than them.
We always want to still pinpoint it to one person.
So for instance,
that's the fault of the media all the time.
I agree.
Always frame the issues around the person.
Because the people they want to interview is, let's call the Fix. As soon as let's call the Fix the Country convener. And then becomes an issue of what the convener said.
Yes.
As opposed to, because really, look at this year's protest on the Stop Galamsey whole thing. Yeah. Yes, initially they started the whole thing, but it took on a life that they couldn't have even reasonably anticipated. Far larger. And so when those things happen, it's also incumbent on the people that have voices to ensure that they are not majoring in situations where we are taking attention from the central issue.
Media.
Yeah, really, because we're more focused on drawing attention to ending Galamsey.
Yeah.
We're more focused on that. And if you want to just dwell on things such as maybe Oliver decommissioning the police track and all, what you are doing is you are giving incentive to political actors to take away from the important conversation that needs to be had.
That's my view.
I really wish
what I think maybe we should also do very quickly here is, and now I'm going back to my former career as a journalist. Is there also not a place for those who would, because here, let me just set a very quick context.
Right.
Because the way that the political experience has become for many people is that, and as we have been talking about interest, is that we have seen over time that people also become activists and they make a career out of it, right? So sometimes there are some vanguards who feel their duty also is to vet people who become whatever, right? And sometimes, maybe the activists themselves may not exactly seek out to be. There are others who also believe that they are actually seeking out to put themselves in certain positions of power. So the way we imagine, and that's what makes a third, fourth conversation difficult.
Always difficult.
There's a huge pile of discredit and concern that people have for you already even before you launch into things. So is there not a place also for people to not lose it in the hubris of an alternative or a critique, and so that we don't leave these people to also become an Oliver to become a monster in his own rights. Maybe.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. I just feel like, for the kind of people we talk about,
well, that's also
I
true.
think like they have to elevate the conversation much higher.
I agree.
Than just thinking Oliver is going to do that. I think the ordinary people and other Ghanaians can do that.
But for me, I think that's even fine. Like, activists can have private intentions.
And that's what I'm saying. They should elevate.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
My point is, people with worse-off intentions are in our public spaces doing these things. So if people with good intentions eventually down the line want to go into the public life, my issue really is that, I think, like you said, I don't think there's enough space for us to even comprehend a situation where somebody does that out of a genuineness to want to see us grow as a country. And we always assume that when people do these things, there's some incentive or there's some.
And there's an example I want to bring, and I feel it's also always the way we view the state.
Yes,
the way it's so far from us. So anybody that seems to want to get into it, we always look at them
critically, because we think that when they get there.
Critical example here now. So now, like, if you're after all these protests and things like that, comes out to say that people should vote for Bawumia, right?
No, she said she didn't say people should vote. She said Bawumia will be the next president. She's not said people.
They
will
have to vote for him. No, but I get what you mean.
Yeah.
Yes, I get what you mean.
Let's cut it or something like that.
Yes, I get what you mean. But what that means is that, why can't she have
that opinion?
Right? Without people saying that she has benefit. Even if you have benefited from it, why not? It's a state. Of course, you could still benefit. But the way we view the state, how far it is from us. So anybody who benefits from it, that, like, for instance, is not close to us, it's supposed to be some enemy.
Because the state.
Then now, this have become a whole conversation about, like, in an election time, 2 days or 3 days to election, we are discussing whether if you took money or not.
Yeah, because Eric, and maybe let me try and hold brief for those who are raising that point. Because the state is also captured. So the way that we have this conversation, I think if you are an activist, not that she can or shouldn't, but I can understand it. If you are an activist in the way that this activism is, because you can see that clearly, even though we are all Ghanaians and we're angry, it's usually about the government, like who's manning the state at the time. So if we have raised all the issues, right? If, for instance, you were a very active voice in it, you were leading it somehow, right? And all of a sudden, you say one of the leaders of the establishment should be the president. I think it naturally raises questions for people as to how did you come to that.
I totally agree.
Yeah, and then the expectation that you have been paid is also a function of the entirety of the character of the establishment. That establishment is an establishment that pays people to do things.
Yeah, no, but I'm sure very soon we'll be delving into what this election would mean for us as people. But I see why anybody would believe that, because it's not like they're not doing that. There are people in establishments that are paying these influencers.
And I think that's a given generally. Even before these influencers, opinion leaders, they will always get to their shared
and journalists
especially.
Yeah, it's not just unique to our political system. Even in America, you have situations where people with voices are always encouraged to endorse one political party or the other. So I don't think it's a problem that's particularly prevalent only here. I think that the wider point Eric was trying to make was that in the understanding of our political system, people should be able to have intentions and opinions as to who should be elected. Yeah. And we should be careful with the type of cynicism that we meet them with. Because, like I was making the point earlier, that we scrutinize people like Oliver, influencers, others, at a higher standard than even we scrutinize the political actors. And it's because, like Eric said, the way we view the state is so far removed from us. We think it's such a huge thing, such a big thing that we must pay all respect to and treat with a certain caution.
Yeah, but if you tell me to vote for one of the safeguards or the vanguards of that, you see why I would.
No, I get why you would meet it with some sort of, but I also think that
even though I'm also very surprised of the level of influence and that it seems. Some private individuals have
but
have
that's a
over
conversation
time.
we'll have another day as to whether these individuals really. It's also a
spillover. I think we roll with anecdotes a lot.
Yeah, the
I
American
don't know if
elections.
Sure has any impact or Kudjo Sheldon has any impact
on
this
election. Yeah, or Kaliche or those other guys.
Or maybe they do.
Maybe they do.
Maybe Eric.
Maybe they'll say we are
forces should fund a research and then we can look into it.
No, but I think they do influence some people.
Yeah, no, but
maybe,
I think
maybe a big shout outs to CDD then to fund the research, and we're
happy to take it
into that way.
No, I think also it's also the thing with politics across the world where it's like when you create this impression that people in influential spaces are supporting you, it gives the impression that, this is something that we can all align with. So you see, for instance,
they are more visible.
Yes, so many celebrities coming around to endorse. Obviously, that didn't make any difference.
Sometimes you just want a conversation, so the people who can draw
an opinion response. And really, with our generation, it is more the influencers, those who have a lot of impact on social media that have that sort of leverage.
So what I was talking about in terms of the benefits from the state and how we view it with that cynicism, it's because, if you're an activist right now, you're protesting for something good.
Yeah.
Someone will just have to go and check whether you're a government worker, and that's enough.
It's
that
easy
kills your activism.
It's easy to discredit
completely.
But also, you know how that happens. This tribal thing that we have created with politics, right? In a way, Ghana has always been worried about ethnic divisions along political lines and all of that. But we seem to have created a new form of it, which is to say that the level of the intensity of that loyalty and belongingness, that identity created with political parties, has become so entrenched that today it is enough to discredit someone. So all it takes is, in this case, as you are saying, go and look into the person's background. Oftentimes, what you don't find is maybe something of their own personal credibility. It's always about their association with.
What you mean.
All it takes is one photo with someone from a different political party, and that's good enough. Right? It is also because, and the political actors themselves also actively use this because they know that this has become some sort of infested identities. But by the nature of the constitutional framework that we have, insofar as the machinery can get into power, the moment they get into power, they are entirely cleaned and they become legitimate. But when they are not in power, they see the liability that comes with it, so they can easily throw that off you to completely discredit you, and it works.
It does.
But somehow we are still really in that. But maybe on that, as we try and wrap up, to maybe begin to also look at what the next couple of years are going to look like. And it's hard to, because we are still in the hands of IMF hand-holding us again for the next time that we will be back. And
hopefully not.
Oh, we are going to be back.
I wish our prophets were actually prophesying how the years are going to unfold under these presidents, rather than telling us who's going to win.
Well, you don't need a prophet to tell you that the next
as we used to do in high school debates. You don't need a soothsayer.
You don't need a prophet to tell you the next 3 years will likely prove difficult. We are going to be resuming our debt repayments. Then we'll be exiting the IMF program.
We're going to be resuming. Does it mean that we have been enjoying?
No, so now there's a stay on our debt repayments.
Oh, so this is better times.
Yes. I mean, what that means is that we have not been paying some of our debts, and we are going through a restructuring process where we are looking to reduce some of our debts and, putting our creditors together. So, obviously, no matter who is elected, the next few years will prove difficult.
So, hopefully they could reduce the scandals to offset that.
But what I'm
imagine also doing that and also having E-Gate scandal.
So for me, I'm really also interested in how we are positioning ourselves also for that, because see, for us, this generation, if we don't see, and it's hard to even voice it out because I don't think it's going to happen, but if we don't see anything that looks like real change, so not real change in terms of doing what we want eventually, but even the ability to be able to engage more, for people to see, for instance, a new way of doing things and thinking about things.
One new way of doing
because
things.
When I was on radio, there was a point when we were having this conversation about the president and his luxurious travels, right? So, for instance, that has died in this conversation.
Of course, it's not part of it.
Because I think that those things are material, they are very important. But the point I'm making is, there was someone who called in or sent in a text message, and I mean, he generally agreed with us on many things, but for him as a citizen of this country, he didn't have it in himself to see that the president could live a life of no luxury. So for me,
it's also come from
good. People can't even imagine it.
Yeah.
And for me, it is that kind of like imagination that I think we need to have. Because if people begin to see the state in the way that we are talking about it, that the state owes you an obligation.
From the state is there to serve you, not the other way around.
And so the way that you tap into,
regardless of your disagreement with Oliver,
yes,
sometimes it's very important to listen to him. I think sometimes the imagination and the things that he tried to challenge, it's where we have to have some of these conversations. Yes. Not to say he's the only one, but I think we should have more.
I mean, of course, now he's gotten more access and voice, so you hear him more. But for me personally, also he demonstrates a very good understanding of things. Even when you have to disagree,
more of that meaningful conversations.
You can see what to disagree
bigger platforms, media spaces and things like that, rather than always just you're calling
newspaper review. But I like the point I was making was whoever is elected. They have an obligation to, if you like, set Ghana on another path. Yeah. We can't continue like this, obviously. And
you've always had this obligation.
We need to ensure that really governance becomes relevant for the people that we are governing. And the people who are elected into positions of power do not think that we've done them a favor, or do not think that they are there to enrich themselves, and they are there to serve us.
But what do you think they will actually do?
Yeah,
but that's
what I think that's
what they should do.
Yeah.
What do you think they will actually do?
You see, the thing
whoever comes to power.
The thing is, sometimes, maybe I'm a bit naive, but I always ascribe best intentions to people until they prove otherwise.
I agree.
And I think that...
Now you have these two parties... You have no justification
for the two parties. You can sign good intentions to maybe cheddar, maybe.
I mean...
oh, no.
I mean, no. Why not cheddar?
Oh, come on.
Why not?
Let's get serious.
What do you mean, let's get serious?
I mean...
Please.
I don't think cheddar offers anything... And I know you guys don't even mean it very seriously.
What do you mean?
But I don't think.
That's from you.
No, because you see, for me, I've told you, I'm really about the norms, the things, because it is those things that people pick up and then.
Managing
if you
tigers.
are an ostentatious guy who loves to keep tigers in your backyard.
There's no way you're going to change anything.
I just don't take you very seriously. I like his Pan-African rhetoric. It's nice. But I mean,
I mean,
that
was just by the way. I mean, like, so the question you ask is, that is what I hope they will do. But is that what they will actually do? Yeah. So I feel like that's what platforms such as these. That's why they are important. That's why we need more people with voices like these.
So we need to do this more.
We need to do this more.
We don't have so much voice though.
But so those who have the access, those who have, and those who are watching us and have those type of platforms, we need to be drumming the idea home. We need a more, I'll not even say sophisticated citizenry, but we need a more demanding citizenry. Like, we need a type of citizenry that...
And that's why I feel so bad when, like, they are on circles and things. I feel they leave the youth out there to drive. Because that's the thing. They have that credibility. Some of these, they are their mates.
So I feel like people in places of influence, we should engender a narrative where politicians know that...
But I just feel... we should just do more.
Politicians should know that we will drag them. We will deal so that if you are going into politics tomorrow. So, for instance, I have come to sit here.
We need to change the incentives.
Everything that I've said. Then tomorrow, if I'm elected, then all of a sudden I become so far removed. People must be able to pull out things such as these and say, "Look, young man, this is what you said, and this is what you are doing." We need to, like, the same way in which when somebody works for you. You see, I'd say that people treat their workers, or they hold their workers to higher standards than they hold their government. When people work for you, people that you pay, you ultimately expect them to show up to work at a certain time. If they don't do their work in terms of the way you are praising them, you kick them out. You ensure that they are doing their duties. But when you elect the government that you spend millions of cedis in paying taxes to every year, you think that it's okay to go to sleep. Or you think that when they are elected in places of power, we should treat the president. It's the presidency. We have to respect the president. I don't believe in that at all. I believe in a system where politicians are actively held to account. And all people, and again, back to the influence thing, if you have a voice, use it. And sometimes the danger is political party hacks or people that are insanely partisan will come after you. And there are so many people that have had, instances where their lives have been threatened because they were doing some form of activism or the other. But when we continue to open up the space where more people believe that...
We could drive them
Yeah, like people now see that I'm just interested in this
them,
country
yes.
functioning. As to who does it, I really don't really care. There are two major parties. Either of them may have different ideas. But if the central idea is for the growth of this country, I feel like that's where we'll be on a path of progress.
I know you were asking what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
But
no, I was actually going to make an appeal now because I think I really am with you on that. I need to make an appeal to
But going
that
to
class.
these elections, I don't think the incentives into
on
going
on
into the
both sides,
election
that is.
for both, especially if you saw the primaries for the MPs, it has not changed.
Yeah.
So because it has not changed, I don't see
Any,
why we should expect any change across both parties.
Yeah.
We can be hopeful.
You know, yes. I mean, some people can succeed because I think some people could get their results at the end of polls. Because if you wanted to punish the ruling party, if they lose, I'm sure you'll be satisfied.
Yeah.
But as to what is going to happen next, I really don't see any change like that coming.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Eric. I'm also very, very pessimistic. But I think on this note,
I'm hopeful.
I'm not
I'm
as
realistic.
hopeful as, I think I'll make an appeal because I agree that part of where we can really, really see change, at least for us, really, is also be able to tap into the resources, the credibility, the image, the experience of some very notable names, right? Even though these days the forces of power, especially on our social media, is really shifting. So we are making an appeal to the people that we interact with a lot on Facebook to an extent.
Have a conversation with Yao Sako.
Yes, I think it would be a lovely conversation to have with somebody like him, because when I see people like that, I like their understanding of issues. I like where they are placed. I like their general understanding. Even sometimes the Pan-African global nature of the way that they analyze our problems. But I also think that they miss a lot in terms of what they think this generation, the options that we really, really have. And there's a way that their fear of what they have seen in the past based on coups and the violence and all of that, they really don't want to see us go into that direction. Nobody wants that. But that also sort of gives room for the violence that occurs within the so-called democratic systems and institutions to get away in a way that once everybody seems to be able to close from work every day and go back home, it doesn't matter if 8 people died in Techiman, right? Yeah, they will complain about it and all of that, but they know very well that against the enormity of the problem that we have, that kind of advocacy is not doing anything now. So it is those who are on the streets, those who are willing to do something extra, who are disrupting. If anything at all, I feel like their contribution to that debate or discourse should be one of guidance and not so much of
criticism.
And deconstruction. Even though I really embrace the criticism and all, but that deconstruction doesn't help, in my view. And I think that, it would be fair, maybe one of these days we can have an opportunity to sit with people like that to have a conversation. But that would be my appeal.
Yeah, my appeal would really be to all Ghanaians, really, and especially young people. It doesn't matter who is elected on the 7th. That's whoever is elected, we have a responsibility to change the way in which we understand the government and understand that the government is elected to serve us. And so we have a duty to constantly remind ourselves that they are there to serve us, and we must hold them to account with every fiber of our being. It doesn't matter your political leaning. It doesn't matter what you believe in. At the end of the day, you can't. The wider thing is we must all believe in this country, and we must all believe in the possibility to change the narrative that this country has been defined by for a period of time. So with every fiber of our being, with every space that we can be in, with every voice that we have, let us continue to hold governments to account. Let us ensure that the government is responsive to our needs, and we must take all measures that are democratically accessible to us to be able to do same.
Eric, so let's say, finish, and then we say subscribe.
I'll just end by saying that we should not treat our democracy, and especially the way we seek account from the people who lead us, as just 4 years we go into an election to just, I think that's the problem.
To just
and I'm also saying that, I don't agree with that, but also just to say, though, that the energy, and the effort we put in on the street during election time, the things that we do, it should be consistent.
And the police should stay away.
And the police should be consistent in the way they treat political parties and their rallies.
They should treat us all the same.
They should treat and provide an enabling environment for us to check the government, even for their own benefit.
So this has been the Sharp Podcast. Subscribe.
Like and subscribe. Guys.
Oh yeah, Charlie, thanks guys. It was really nice, and hope that we are back sometime again. Peace out.
See you.